Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy Nature Channel. Tonight, let yourself settle into a quiet place. Let your shoulders drop. Let your breathing slow down just a little. We're going to travel together to one of the gentlest mysteries in the natural world. A place where the earth itself hums and whispers, where dunes breathe out soft music, and where sand becomes a song. Tonight, we explore the singing sand. You may have never heard of it before, and that's perfectly fine. It's one of those hidden wonders that waits patiently in faraway deserts and along certain shores, asking for nothing, offering everything. When conditions are just right, when the wind stirs, when footsteps press down, when the world shifts ever so slightly, the sand begins to sing, not with words, but with a low vibrating hum that fills the air like the voice of the earth remembering something ancient and soft. So breathe in gently, breathe out slowly. Let's walk together into this world of sound and silence, where every grain of sand holds a secret. The first thing you should know is that singing sand is real. It's not a legend or a trick of the mind. It exists in certain places scattered across the world, and when you stand on it, when you slide down a dune or drag your hand through it, the sand vibrates and hums. Some people describe it as a low drone, like the sound of a distant engine or a cello playing one long note. Others say it sounds like thunder rolling far away, or like the earth itself is breathing. Scientists call them, quote, zero. But that name feels too sharp for something so gentle. The sound isn't a boom, it's more like a murmur, a song that rises from below and wraps around you, filling your chest with its vibration. These sands exist in only a few places. There are singing dunes in the deserts of California and Nevada, along the shores of certain beaches in Hawaii and Japan, in the vast Sahara, in the Gobi Desert, and in the Arabian sands. Each place has its own voice, its own pitch and tone, as if the earth speaks different languages depending on where you are. The sound happens because of the way the grains move against each other. Each grain is smooth and round, polished by wind and time. When they tumble together, when they slide in just the right way, they create vibrations. And those vibrations travel through the sand like ripples through water, building into a hum you can feel in your bones. Imagine standing on a dune at dusk. The sky is soft with fading light. You take a step forward, and beneath your feet, the sand begins to sing. It's not loud, it's gentle, like the world is humming a lullaby just for you. The sound can last for seconds or even minutes. It depends on how much sand is moving, how steep the dune is, how dry the grains are. Moisture silences the sand. Rain makes it heavy and quiet. But when the sand is dry, when the sun has warmed it all day long, it holds its song inside, waiting. Some dunes sing at certain frequencies, low notes that rumble at around 70 or 90 hertz. That's a frequency you feel as much as hear. It vibrates through your body, resonates in your chest, connects you to the earth in a way that words cannot. There's a place in the Mojave Desert called Kelso Dunes, where the sand sings on warm afternoons. Visitors climb the dunes slowly, and when they slide back down, the sand hums beneath them, a sound so unexpected that people stop and listen, smiling without knowing why. In the Gobi Desert, travelers have written about the singing sands for centuries. Ancient traders crossing those vast spaces would hear the dunes hum at night when the temperature dropped and the wind shifted. They called it the voice of spirits, the earth speaking to the sky. But there are no spirits needed here, only sand, only wind, only time. The song is simply physics, the movement of tiny grains creating something beautiful without trying. On the island of Kauai in Hawaii, there's a beach where the sand squeaks when you walk on it. It's a lighter sound than the desert dunes, more playful, like the sand is giggling. Each footstep creates a soft chirp, a gentle reminder that even the smallest things can make music. Not all sand can sing. The grains need to be a certain size, not too big, not too small. They need to be well sorted, meaning they're all roughly the same size. And they need to be smooth, rounded by wind rather than water, because water-worn grains are too irregular. The best singing sand is made of quartz, that clear mineral that catches the light. Quartz is hard and smooth, and when quartz grains tumble together, they create that perfect friction, that perfect vibration. Some researchers have spent years trying to understand exactly why singing sand sings. They've measured the grain size, the moisture content, the slope of the dunes. They've recorded the sounds and analyzed the frequencies. And while they've learned much, there's still a sense of mystery, a feeling that the sand holds secrets it hasn't fully shared. That mystery is part of the beauty. Not everything needs to be explained. Sometimes it's enough to simply listen. If you ever find yourself near singing sand, take your time. Sit down on the dune. Feel the warmth beneath you. Run your fingers through the grains and listen. The sound might not come right away. It's shy in a way, appearing only when conditions align. But when it does, when that low hum rises from the sand, you'll understand why people have been enchanted by it for so long. It's a sound that feels older than cities, older than words, a sound that connects you to something vast and patient. The wind is the conductor of this orchestra. When it blows across the dunes, it shifts millions of grains at once, and the sand responds with a song. Some days the wind is gentle and the song is soft. Other days the wind is strong and the dunes roar with sound. In the Bedtime Desert in China, there are dunes that sing so loudly the sound can be heard from miles away. Local people say the dunes are singing to each other, calling across the desert in a language only they understand. And perhaps that's true in its own way. Perhaps the dunes do speak to each other through vibration and resonance, through the slow movement of sand that has traveled across continents and centuries. Tonight, as you rest, imagine yourself on such a dune. The sun is setting, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. The sand beneath you is warm, holding the heat of the day. And as you shift your weight, as you slide just a little, the sand begins to hum. It's a sound that asks nothing of you. It doesn't need you to understand it or name it. It simply is, a gift from the earth, a reminder that beauty exists in the smallest, quietest places. Before we continue deeper into this gentle mystery, if you're enjoying this journey, I'd love for you to leave a comment below, maybe share if you've ever heard an unusual sound in nature. And if this story is helping you relax, a little like would mean the world. There's also a whole playlist of calming nature stories waiting for you, perfect for nights when sleep feels far away. Now, let's walk a little further into the singing sands, where more wonders wait. The singing sand doesn't perform on command. It waits. It requires patience, the right temperature, the right dryness. It's a collaboration between the earth and the conditions around it. A song that emerges only when everything aligns. In some deserts, the sand sings best in the late afternoon when the sun has baked the dunes all day. The heat drives out any moisture that might have settled during the cooler night, leaving the grains dry and ready to vibrate. As the temperature peaks, the dunes seem to hold their breath, waiting for the first movement, the first touch that will release the sound. There's a dune in the Namib Desert in southern Africa, where the sand glows orange in the setting sun. It's one of the oldest deserts in the world, and its sands have been singing for millions of years. When the wind picks up in the evening, the dunes hum with a deep, resonant tone that travelers describe as almost orchestral, as if the desert itself is an instrument being played by invisible hands. The Namib's singing sands are made of tiny grains of quartz mixed with iron oxide, which gives them that rich, warm color. The iron doesn't affect the sound. It's still the quartz that sings, but it adds to the beauty, turning the dunes into flowing rivers of amber and rust. Each grain of sand in a singing dune has traveled a long distance. It may have started as part of a mountain, broken down by weather and time, carried by rivers to the sea, tumbled by waves, then blown inland by wind. By the time it reaches a singing dune, it has been polished smooth, rounded by countless collisions, shaped into the perfect form for creating sound. This journey can take thousands or even millions of years. Each grain holds that history inside it, silent until it meets other grains, until it's set in motion, until the conditions are just right. When you walk on singing sand, you're walking on time itself, on particles that have witnessed the slow transformation of landscapes, the rise and fall of ancient seas, the patience of stone becoming sand. In the Arabian desert, there are Bedouin stories about the singing dunes. Elders tell of travelers who would hear the sand sing at night and believe it was the voice of jinn, spirits of the desert. But rather than fear, these stories often carry a sense of wonder, a recognition that the desert holds mysteries worth listening to. The sound of singing sand can be surprisingly loud. When a large portion of a dune slides, perhaps triggered by wind or by someone walking across it, the resulting hum can reach volumes of over 100 decibels. That's as loud as a motorcycle or a chainsaw, yet it doesn't feel harsh. The sound is low and resonant, a vibration that fills the space without aggression. It's been described as the sound of a giant's breath or a whale singing deep underwater. There's something primal about it, something that bypasses thought and speaks directly to the body. The frequency of the singing depends on the size of the grains and how they're moving. Smaller grains tend to produce higher pitches, while larger grains create lower, deeper tones. Most singing dunes produce sounds in the range of 50 to 300 hertz, frequencies that humans perceive as deep, warm, and calming. Scientists have discovered that the grains don't just vibrate randomly. They move in synchronized waves, billions of tiny particles sliding together in unison. This coordination creates what's called a stick-slip motion. The grains stick together briefly, build up pressure, then slip past each other, releasing energy as sound. It's a bit like playing a violin. The bow grips the string, builds tension, then releases it, creating a vibration. The singing sand does the same thing, millions of times per second, creating a continuous tone that rises from the dune like breath. In some places, you can make the sand sing just by dragging your hand through it. The motion disturbs the grains, sets them sliding, and if conditions are right, the sand responds with a soft whistle or hum. It's an intimate experience, a direct conversation between your body and the earth. There's a beach in Scotland called Eigg, where the sand is made of tiny shell fragments mixed with quartz. When you walk on it, the sand squeaks beneath your feet. A lighter, higher sound than the desert dunes, but no less magical. Children love it. They run back and forth, laughing at the strange music they're creating without trying. The squeaking happens for the same reason the dunes boom. The grains are smooth and round, and they vibrate when compressed. But because beach sand is often finer and more tightly packed, the sound is higher pitched, more like the chirp of crickets than the hum of a cello. Moisture is the enemy of singing sand. When grains are wet, they stick together, losing the ability to slip and slide freely. A light rain can silence a singing dune for days until the sun returns and dries it out again. In humid climates, singing sand is rare because the grains never fully dry. But in the arid deserts, where rain is scarce and the sun is relentless, the sand stays dry and ready. The dunes wait through the seasons, through years, through centuries, holding their songs inside until the right moment arrives. In Nevada, in the Great Basin Desert, there's a place called Sand Mountain. It's a massive dune, several hundred feet high, and on hot summer days, it sings. People come from far away just to hear it, to feel that deep vibration rising through the sand. Some climb to the top and slide down, setting off avalanches of sand that roar and hum as they cascade downward. The sound can last for several minutes, a long, sustained note that gradually fades as the sand settles. In that fading, there's a sense of the earth returning to silence, resting, preparing for the next song. There's something deeply calming about that rhythm, the sound rising, sustaining, then gently dissolving. It mirrors the rhythm of breathing, the cycle of tension and release that carries us through each day. If you've been enjoying this story so far, perhaps you could take a moment to leave a like. It helps others discover these peaceful moments too. And if you have your own memory of a sound in nature that moved you, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. There are many more stories like this one in the playlist, each one a doorway to calm. The science of singing sand is relatively new, but the human experience of it is ancient. Long before researchers began measuring frequencies and analyzing grain size, people were listening to the dunes and creating their own stories about what they heard. In Marco Polo's writings from the 13th century, he described crossing the deserts of Central Asia and hearing strange sounds, drums and music that seemed to come from nowhere. Historians believe he was describing singing sand, though he interpreted it through the lens of his own time, attributing it to spirits or supernatural forces. There's no shame in that interpretation. When you stand alone in a vast desert and the sand beneath you begins to hum with a sound that fills the air, it's natural to feel that something beyond the ordinary is happening. The experience transcends simple physics. It becomes almost spiritual, a moment where the boundary between yourself and the earth seems to dissolve. In the Altyn-Emel National Park in Kazakhstan, there's a dune called the Singing Barkan. It's several miles long and rises nearly 500 feet above the surrounding plain. On calm days, when the wind shifts the sand just right, the dune produces a deep, resonant tone that can be heard for miles. Local people have honored this place for generations, visiting it as a site of natural wonder and quiet reflection. The word "tu" comes from Turkic languages and refers to a crescent-shaped dune. These dunes are sculptures of wind, shaped by currents of air into graceful curves that look like waves frozen in motion. The singing Barkan is particularly beautiful. Its ridges sharp and elegant, its slopes smooth and inviting. When wind blows over a Barkan, it creates patterns in the sand, ripples and ridges that look like fingerprints or waves on water. These patterns are themselves a kind of music made visible, a record of movement and time written in grains of quartz. The ripples form because wind moves sand grains in a rhythmic way. Smaller grains are lifted and carried further, while larger grains stay closer to where they started. This sorting creates regular patterns, like the rhythm in a song or the beat in a drum. Some singing dunes are protected now, recognized as natural monuments worth preserving. In these places, visitors are asked to tread lightly, to respect the fragile ecosystems that exist even in the harshest deserts. Insects, lizards, and small mammals make their homes in and around the dunes, adapted to the extreme temperatures and scarce water. The sand itself is alive in a way, not biologically, but dynamically. It moves constantly, shifting with the wind, climbing up one side of a dune and sliding down the other. A dune is never static. It breathes, it travels, it transforms. Over decades, a singing dune might migrate several hundred feet, moving across the landscape like a slow, patient creature. In Chile's Atacama Desert, one of the driest places on Earth, there are dunes that sing rarely but powerfully. The Atacama receives almost no rain. Some areas have gone decades without a single drop. Here, the sand is perpetually dry. But the conditions for singing are so specific that the dunes remain mostly silent, waiting for that perfect alignment of wind, temperature, and disturbance. When the Atacama dunes do sing, the sound is said to be especially pure, uncontaminated by moisture or vegetation. It's the sound of absolute dryness, of sand that has never known rain, of grains polished by wind alone. There's a meditation in that patience. The dunes don't force their song. They simply wait, existing in silence until the moment comes. And when it does, they sing without hesitation, without holding back, offering everything they have before returning to quiet. In our own lives, we might learn something from this rhythm. There are times to speak, to make sound, to share what we carry inside. And there are times to rest in silence, to wait without anxiety, trusting that the right moment will arrive. The pitch of a singing dune song can tell you something about its history. Higher pitches suggest smaller grains, which often means the sand has traveled a long distance, broken down over time into finer particles. Lower pitches suggest larger grains, perhaps sand that hasn't traveled as far or has been recently created by the weathering of nearby rocks. In the Sahara, where singing dunes are scattered across vast distances, each dune has its own signature sound. If you could listen to recordings from different dunes, you'd hear the variety, some deep and droning, others higher and more melodic, each one unique as a voice. The Sahara is the largest hot desert in the world, and within its millions of square miles, singing sand appears in only a few locations. This rarity makes each singing dune even more precious, a concentrated point of wonder in an already wondrous landscape. When a dune sings, it's not just the surface sand that's vibrating. The sound penetrates deep into the dune, activating grains several feet down. The entire structure resonates, becoming a single instrument, a unified body producing a single note. Researchers have used microphones and sensors to study this phenomenon, placing equipment at different depths within the dune. They've found that the vibrations are strongest near the surface, but can be detected deep within the sand, suggesting that the dune acts as an amplifier, gathering and focusing the sound of individual grains into something much larger. It's a beautiful example of emergence, how small, simple interactions can create complex, unexpected outcomes. Each grain contributes almost nothing on its own, but together, coordinated by the physics of motion and friction, they create something remarkable. There are forests where trees communicate through their roots, sharing nutrients and information through fungal networks. There are flocks of birds that move as one, creating patterns in the sky without a leader. And there are dunes that sing, each grain participating in a symphony it doesn't consciously create, but contributes to perfectly. Nature is full of these quiet collaborations, these moments where the whole becomes more than the sum of its parts. The singing sand is just one example, but it's a powerful reminder that connection and coordination happen everywhere, in ways we're only beginning to understand. In the summer, when singing dunes are at their most active, the surface temperature of the sand can reach over 150 degrees Fahrenheit. That's hot enough to burn exposed skin, yet beneath the surface, just a few inches down, the temperature drops significantly. The sand acts as insulation, protecting whatever lies below from the extreme heat. This means that even as the surface sings, there's a cooler, quieter world just beneath, where beetles and other creatures wait out the heat of the day. At night, when the air cools, they emerge to hunt and forage, living their lives in rhythm with the desert cycles. The singing usually happens during the day, when temperatures are highest and the sand is driest, but occasionally, on nights when the wind is right, a dune will sing in darkness. Those who have heard it describe the experience as almost otherworldly, a deep hum rising from invisible sand, filling the night with resonance. If you're finding peace in this journey through the singing sands, I'd be grateful if you'd take a moment to like this video. It helps this channel grow and brings these stories to more people who need calm. And if you haven't yet, explore the playlist. There are so many gentle wonders waiting to help you rest. Let's continue walking through this landscape of sound and stillness. The relationship between singing sand and silence is intimate. The dunes spend most of their existence in quiet, undisturbed by wind or footsteps. They rest in stillness, holding their potential for sound inside, content to simply be. This silence isn't empty, it's full of presence. The presence of the sun warming the sand, the presence of stars at night, the presence of time moving slowly across the landscape. The dunes exist in a state of readiness, not waiting anxiously, but simply existing until the moment for song arrives. There's a lesson in that kind of patience. In human life, we often feel pressure to constantly produce, to always be making sound or motion, to prove our worth through activity. But the singing sand reminds us that there's value in stillness, in holding potential without forcing it into expression. The dunes don't sing to prove they can. They sing because conditions align, because the physics of their being makes it inevitable in certain moments. And when those moments pass, they return to silence without regret. In Death Valley, California, there are sand dunes that rise among mountains and salt flats. These dunes are called the Mesquite Flat Sand Dunes, and while they're not primarily known for singing, there are times when conditions are right and the sand produces a soft, murmuring sound. Death Valley is one of the hottest places on Earth, with summer temperatures regularly exceeding 120 degrees. Yet, even here, life persists. Desert plants with roots that reach deep for water, animals that hunt at dawn and dusk, avoiding the brutal midday heat. The sand here is light-colored, almost white in places, made of quartz and feldspar broken down from the surrounding mountains. When wind moves across these dunes, it creates delicate patterns, ephemeral art that lasts until the next gust rearranges everything. The impermanence of these patterns mirrors the impermanence of the sand's song. Nothing lasts, and perhaps that's what makes these moments so precious. The sand sings, then stops. The patterns form, then dissolve. Everything is temporary, everything is fleeting, and yet each moment, while it lasts, is complete. Some researchers have tried to recreate singing sand in laboratories, filling containers with carefully sorted grains and attempting to trigger the sound under controlled conditions. Sometimes it works. The sand hums obediently in its artificial environment. But often, there's something missing, some element that can't be replicated outside the desert. Perhaps it's the scale. Laboratories can't match the vast quantity of sand in a natural dune. Or perhaps it's the environment, the sun, the wind, the particular quality of light and space that exists only in wild places. Or perhaps there's something else, something unmeasurable that makes the difference between a sound produced in a lab and a song sung by the earth itself. Not everyone who visits a singing dune will hear it sing. The phenomenon is occasional, not constant. You might arrive on a day when the sand is too damp, or the wind is wrong, or the temperature hasn't reached the right point. You might walk across a dune that sang magnificently yesterday, but is silent today. This unpredictability is part of the gift. The sand doesn't perform on schedule. It reminds us that not everything can be controlled or planned, that some experiences require us to accept uncertainty and trust that what we need will arrive in its own time. If you do hear singing sand, even once in your life, the memory stays with you. People who have experienced it describe feeling changed by it, marked by the encounter in a way that's hard to explain. It's not dramatic. There's no sudden revelation or transformation. It's subtler than that. It's a sense of having touched something ancient and patient, something that connects you to the earth in a new way. In the Rub al-Khali, the quote, "Three of Arabia," the largest continuous sand desert in the world, there are dunes that sing in the deep interior, far from any human settlement. These songs are heard only by the occasional traveler, the rare explorer, the animals that make the desert their home. The Empty Quarter is aptly named. It's one of the most inhospitable places on Earth, with summer temperatures that can kill an unprotected person in hours. Yet, even here, beauty persists. The dunes rise in waves hundreds of feet high, their crests sharp as blades, their slopes flowing like frozen water. When these dunes sing, there's no audience except the sky and the stars. The sound rises into space, carried on wind that might not touch human ears for hundreds of miles. It's a reminder that beauty doesn't exist for observers. It simply exists, whether witnessed or not. That might be the most profound thing about singing sand. It doesn't need you. It was singing before humans existed, and it will sing long after we're gone. Your presence doesn't create the phenomenon. It only allows you to witness it, to participate briefly in something much larger and older than yourself. There's humility in that recognition, but also comfort. The world is full of beauty that doesn't depend on us, beauty that continues regardless of human attention. The stars shine whether we look up. The ocean waves roll in whether we stand on the shore. The sand sings whether we listen. And yet, when we do witness these things, when we do listen, something shifts. We become part of the story, woven briefly into the larger pattern. The sand sings for no one, but when you're there, it sings for you. And that paradox holds something precious. In Tibet, high in the Himalayas, there are dunes that sing at altitudes where the air is thin and cold. These dunes are rare. Most sand deserts exist at lower elevations in hot, dry climates. But here, in the shadow of the world's tallest mountains, sand has accumulated in valleys, blown in from distant sources, creating pockets of desert in the midst of stone and snow. The Tibetan singing dunes are particularly mysterious. The cold affects how the sand behaves, and the thin air changes how sound travels. The songs here are different, perhaps higher pitched, perhaps more crystalline, shaped by an environment unlike any other singing dune on earth. Tibetan Buddhists have lived near some of these dunes for centuries, and the singing sand has become part of local spiritual tradition. Some see it as a form of natural mantra, a meditation bell rung by the earth itself. Others simply appreciate it as one of many wonders in a landscape full of sacred beauty. The idea of the earth as a source of spiritual sound appears in many traditions. Church bells call people to prayer. Temple gongs mark moments of transition. And in the desert, the sand sings. No human hand required, just the slow work of wind and time. Whether you approach singing sand through the lens of science or spirituality, the experience remains the same. You stand on a dune, the world around you vast and quiet, and then the earth begins to hum. Your body feels it before your mind understands it. A vibration that starts in your feet and rises through your legs, settling in your chest. It's a feeling of connection, of being held by something much larger than yourself. Not held in a frightening way, but held the way the earth holds everything, patiently, consistently, without judgment or expectation. If this story is giving you a sense of that holding, that calm, perhaps you could share it with someone else who needs peace tonight. A like helps this channel continue creating these spaces of rest. And remember, there's a whole playlist of gentle stories, each one a place you can return to whenever the world feels too loud. There's a rhythm to how singing sand moves. It doesn't flow continuously like water. Instead, it moves in pulses, in waves, each one building and releasing. This creates a pattern in the sound, a wavering quality, a rise and fall that makes the song feel alive. Scientists have studied this rhythm and found it's related to how the grains interact with each other. As sand slides down a slope, it doesn't move at a constant speed. It accelerates, then slows, then accelerates again, creating a cycle that translates into the pulsing quality of the sound. This rhythm matches many natural cycles: the rhythm of breathing, the rhythm of waves, the rhythm of a heartbeat. Perhaps that's part of why the sound feels so calming. Our bodies recognize the pattern, even if our minds don't consciously understand it. The indigenous people of Australia's Simpson Desert have stories about sand that speaks. In their oral traditions, the dunes are living presences, entities with their own awareness and will. The singing of the sand is seen as a form of communication, the desert speaking to those who know how to listen. These stories carry deep ecological knowledge. Indigenous Australians have lived in desert environments for tens of thousands of years, developing intimate relationships with landscapes that seem harsh to outsiders. Their understanding of the desert, where to find water, which plants are edible, how to navigate vast distances, is encoded in stories that honor the land as a living, conscious being. Whether the sand is literally conscious is a question science can't answer, but the stories remind us of something important. We are part of the earth, not separate from it. The same elements that make up the sand make up our bodies. The same forces that move the dunes move through us. We're all vibrating, all participating in the same grand pattern. In the Sinai Desert, where ancient peoples crossed on pilgrimages and trade routes, there are dunes that have been singing for millennia. The pharaohs might have heard these dunes. The builders of the pyramids might have rested near them. The same songs that fill the air today were sung when human civilization was just beginning. That continuity is staggering. Empires have risen and fallen. Languages have been born and died. Entire cultures have emerged and vanished. But the singing sand continues, unchanged, patient, constant. It puts our individual lives in perspective. We live for decades, maybe a century if we're fortunate. The singing sand has been performing for millions of years and will continue for millions more. We're brief visitors, tourists passing through a world that was here long before us and will remain long after. But that doesn't make our experience less valuable. If anything, it makes it more precious. We get this one moment, this one life, to stand on a singing dune and feel the earth hum beneath our feet. That's not a small thing. That's a gift beyond measure. The grain size of singing sand typically ranges from 0.1 to 0.5 millimeters in diameter. That's tiny, about the size of a grain of table sugar or salt. Each individual grain is invisible to the naked eye as anything more than a speck, yet millions of them together create dunes hundreds of feet high. This is the power of accumulation, the miracle of small things adding up. One grain of sand is nothing. 1,000,000 grains is a handful. 1,000,000,000,000 grains is a dune. And when those grains move together, when they coordinate their motion through the simple physics of friction and vibration, they create sound that can be heard for miles. In our own lives, this principle applies. Small actions, repeated consistently, accumulate into significant change. A single breath doesn't calm you, but 100 breaths, taken with attention, can shift your entire state. A single kind word doesn't change a relationship, but thousands of them, offered over years, build something unshakable. The singing sand teaches patience and persistence. It doesn't try to create its song all at once. It allows each grain to contribute its tiny friction, its small vibration, trusting that the sum will be enough. In Morocco, In the Erg Chebi Dunes near the Algerian border, tourists can experience singing sand as part of guided desert expeditions. At sunset, guides lead groups to the tallest dunes and encourage them to run or slide down the slopes, triggering the sand song. As the sun sets and the sky turns colors, violet and pink and burning orange, the dunes hum beneath dozens of feet, creating a chorus of sound that mixes with laughter and wonder. It's a joyful experience, communal and celebratory, the desert offering its music as a gift to those willing to climb its heights. There's something democratic about singing sand. It doesn't care who you are, where you're from, what language you speak. If you step on it in the right way, at the right time, it will sing for you the same as it sings for anyone else. The earth doesn't play favorites. Its gifts are offered equally, without judgment. After the sun sets and the tourists return to camp, the dunes fall silent again. The singing fades. The footprints are erased by wind, and the desert returns to its natural state, vast, quiet, patient. Tomorrow might bring more visitors, or it might not. The sand doesn't mind either way. This indifference isn't cold. It's a form of acceptance, of being present without attachment. The sand exists fully in each moment, whether that moment includes human witnesses or only the stars and the wind. Some animals have learned to avoid singing sand. The vibrations can be disturbing to creatures that rely on ground-borne signals for navigation or hunting. Desert foxes, for instance, seem to skirt around areas where the sand is most likely to sing, preferring firmer ground or different types of dunes. Other animals seem unbothered. Lizards scurry across singing sand without hesitation, their lightweight insufficient to trigger the phenomenon at a scale they'd notice. Insects burrow into it, living their entire lives within sand that occasionally vibrates around them. Life adapts to everything, even to ground that hums. The desert is full of such adaptations, plants that can go years without water, animals that never drink, seeds that remain dormant for decades, waiting for the one rain that will allow them to grow. The singing sand is just another variable, another condition to be accepted and navigated. Humans, too, have adapted to living near singing sand. In some desert communities, the phenomenon is so ordinary that people barely remark on it. Children grow up hearing the dunes hum, treating it as casually as a city child might treat traffic noise, or a rural child might treat crickets chirping. Familiarity doesn't necessarily breed contempt or boredom. Sometimes it breeds a deeper appreciation. When you hear singing sand regularly, you learn its moods, its patterns. You know which days are likely to produce the best songs. You recognize the difference between the high, whistling notes of a small slide and the deep, resonant boom of a major avalanche. You become fluent in a language most people never hear. There are photographs of singing dunes taken from space, satellite images that show the dunes as golden waves frozen in a moment of time. From that height, you can't hear the songs, but you can see the patterns, the way the dunes are shaped by wind into elegant curves and ridges. Those patterns are evidence of the same forces that create the songs. Wind shapes the dunes, and the dunes sing when they move. Form and function are united, beauty and physics inseparable. Before we continue deeper into the world of singing sand, if you're feeling relaxed and peaceful, perhaps you could take a moment to leave a comment. Maybe share where you're listening from, or what this story is helping you feel. and alike, if you're willing, helps this channel reach others who are searching for calm. The playlist has many more stories like this, each one a doorway to rest. Let's walk a little further. The wind that moves singing sand is itself a kind of song. It's the invisible conductor, the force that initiates the performance. Without wind, the sand might remain silent indefinitely, stable and still on its slope, holding its potential inside. But the wind comes, as it always does in the desert, and everything changes. The wind doesn't blow constantly at the same speed. It gusts and calms, surges and retreats, creating a dynamic environment where the sand is constantly being tested, constantly on the edge of motion. When the wind reaches the right speed, strong enough to move sand but not so strong that it creates chaos, the dunes begin their slow transformation. Sand grains lift from one side of the dune and settle on the other. The crest of the dune shifts forward, grain by grain, moving across the desert at a pace that can only be measured over years. During this migration, when conditions align, the sand sings. The sound is a side effect of movement, an unintended consequence of physics, yet it feels like intentional music. The dune seems to be celebrating its journey, marking its passage with sound. In the Taklamakan Desert in western China, the second largest sand desert in the world, there are singing dunes that produce remarkably consistent sounds. Researchers have recorded these dunes and found that the pitch remains stable over long periods, suggesting that the grain size and composition of the sand are highly uniform. The Taklamakan is sometimes called, quote, four, because of how difficult it is to cross. Ancient Silk Road traders skirted its edges, wary of venturing deep into a landscape where water is scarce, and temperatures can swing from furnace hot during the day to freezing at night. Yet even in this harsh environment, beauty thrives. The dunes rise in magnificent formations, their slopes perfect curves of gold and amber. When they sing, the sound carries across the emptiness, a note of life in a place that seems to deny it. The consistency of the Taklamakan dune song suggests something important. Singing sand isn't random, it's predictable, governed by laws that, while complex, are ultimately understandable. The mystery isn't that we don't know how it works. We do, mostly, but that it works at all, that such simple materials can produce something so beautiful. There's a difference between understanding something intellectually and experiencing it emotionally. You can read about singing sand, study the physics, memorize the equations, and still be completely unprepared for the feeling of standing on a humming dune with the sun setting and the world vibrating around you. Knowledge enhances wonder. It doesn't replace it. Knowing how the sand sings doesn't make the experience less magical. If anything, it deepens the magic, adding layers of appreciation for the precise conditions required, the millions of years of geological history that led to this moment. In southern Peru, in the Ica Desert, there's a massive dune called Cerro Blanco, White Hill. It's one of the tallest sand dunes in the world, rising nearly 4,000 feet from its base to its summit. Climbing it takes hours, and the sand shifts beneath every step, making progress exhausting. But at the top, the view is breathtaking, an ocean of sand stretching to the horizon, waves of dunes frozen in mid-motion, the Andes Mountains visible in the distance, their peaks capped with snow even as the desert below bakes in the sun. And sometimes when you slide down Cerro Blanco's eastern slope, the sand sings. The sound is powerful at this scale, generated by enormous quantities of sand moving together. It's not a gentle hum, it's a roar, a proclamation, the earth speaking in a voice that demands attention. The local people have known about this phenomenon for generations. They call the dune the Singing Mountain, and some believe it's a sacred place, a point where the earth's energy is particularly strong. Whether you frame it in spiritual or scientific terms, the effect is the same. Standing on Cerro Blanco as it sings, you feel small and significant at once. Small, because the forces at work are so much larger than you. Significant, because you're here to witness them, to be part of this moment. The sand grains that make up singing dunes are mostly quartz, but they're rarely pure quartz. They're usually mixed with other minerals, feldspar, mica, magnetite, calcite, that add color and character. These impurities don't prevent the sand from singing, but they do affect its appearance. Some singing dunes are nearly white, their quartz grains almost pure. Others are golden, tinted by iron oxide. Still others are reddish or even pink, colored by various minerals ground down from ancient rocks. This diversity of color adds to the beauty. As the sun moves across the sky, the dunes change color, shifting through shades of amber, rose, violet, and shadow. The same dune that glows golden at noon might look purple at sunset, transformed by light into something entirely new. Yet, through all these changes, the fundamental nature of the sand remains constant. The grains are the same, the physics are the same. Only our perception changes, influenced by light and angle and time. In our own lives, we experience this same phenomenon. We change moods, perspectives, feelings, yet some essential core remains constant. The singing sand reminds us that transformation and continuity can coexist, that change doesn't erase what came before. There are singing beaches as well as singing deserts. These beaches, found in places like Hawaii, Brazil, and Japan, produce sounds when you walk on them, though the sound is typically higher pitched and squeakier than desert dunes. Beach sand singing is slightly different from desert dune singing. Beach sand is often rounder, polished by water rather than wind, and it's usually wetter, which changes how the grains interact. The sound is produced by the same stick-slip mechanism, but the conditions are different enough that the result is distinct. On a singing beach, the sound is more playful, almost comical. Each footstep produces a squeak or chirp, like the sand is giggling beneath you. Children especially love this, delighting in the unexpected noise. But whether the sound is a deep boom or a high squeak, the principle is the same. Movement creates friction. Friction creates vibration. Vibration creates sound. The earth is full of potential music, waiting only for the right conditions to express itself. The temperature of the sand affects not just whether it will sing, but how it will sing. Warmer sand tends to produce clearer, louder sounds, while cooler sand is quieter and less responsive. This is because temperature affects the surface properties of the grains, changing how easily they slip past each other. On very hot days, when the desert sand is almost too hot to touch, the dunes are most likely to sing. The heat has driven out every trace of moisture, leaving the grains completely dry and free. They're primed for motion, ready to respond to the slightest disturbance. As evening approaches and the temperature drops, the singing becomes quieter, more subdued. The sand cools, contracts slightly, becomes less eager to move. By night, most singing dunes are silent, resting under the stars, gathering heat again from the sun that will rise tomorrow. This daily cycle mirrors the larger cycles of life, activity and rest, expression and silence, giving and receiving. Nothing can sing constantly. Everything needs time to rest, to recharge, to simply exist without performing. The singing sand teaches us to honor these cycles, to recognize that rest isn't failure but preparation, that silence isn't emptiness but fullness, waiting for the right moment to overflow into sound. If you're finding wisdom and peace in this exploration of singing sand, I'd be grateful if you'd like this video and perhaps leave a comment about what speaks to you most. These small actions help build a community of people seeking calm. And if you haven't explored the playlist yet, there are many more gentle journeys waiting for you there. Not all deserts have singing sand, just as not all forests have the same trees or all oceans the same fish. Each landscape has its own character, its own particular expression of the forces that shape it. The deserts with singing sand tend to be large, dry, and windy, places where sand has accumulated in great quantities and has been sorted and polished by consistent air currents over long periods. They're often inland deserts, far from the moisture of oceans, where rain is rare and the sun is relentless. But even within these general parameters, each singing desert is unique. The Sahara's songs are different from the Gobis, which are different from the Mojaves. The grain sizes vary, the mineral content differs, the slopes have different angles. Each dune has its own voice, its own way of responding to wind and motion. A trained ear could probably identify which desert a recording came from just by listening to the pitch and timbre of the sound. The dunes are that distinctive, that individual. This individuality extends to the smallest scale. If you could listen to individual grains of sand as they vibrate, each one would have its own tiny frequency, its own microscopic song. Millions of these individual songs combine to create the chorus you hear, a collective voice that transcends any single contributor. It's a powerful metaphor for community, for how individual voices can combine into something larger without losing their distinctiveness. Each grain matters, each grain contributes, and together they create beauty that none could achieve alone. In Jordan, near the ancient city of Petra, there are wadis, dry riverbeds, where sand accumulates and occasionally sings. These are different from the massive dune fields of larger deserts. Here, the sand is confined to valleys, hemmed in by rock walls, creating a more intimate setting. When the sand in these wadis sings, the sound echoes off the stone walls, creating a natural amplification. The rocks catch the vibrations and throw them back, layering the sound, making it more complex and rich. It's an accidental acoustic design, a concert hall created by erosion and time. The singing sand performs, and the ancient rocks provide the architecture, shaping the sound into something even more beautiful than it would be on its own. This collaboration between sand and stone speaks to interconnection. Nothing exists in isolation. The sand's song is shaped by the stone around it. The stone's presence is revealed by the sand that accumulates against it. They define each other, need each other, create meaning through their relationship. The same is true in human life. We're shaped by our environments, by the people around us, by the landscapes we inhabit. And we, in turn, shape these things, leaving marks that outlast us, contributing to patterns that will continue long after we're gone. Some scientists speculate that singing sand might have played a role in ancient myths and legends. The sound of a humming dune could easily be interpreted as supernatural by people who didn't understand the mechanism. A dragon breathing underground, gods conversing, spirits wandering the desert. These interpretations aren't wrong exactly. They're different ways of engaging with the same mystery, different languages for expressing wonder. Ancient peoples weren't naive. They were perceptive, noticing phenomena and creating stories to encode their observations. When you strip away the mythological language, many old stories contain accurate ecological information. The dragon that quotes 6 might be a way of describing a singing dune. The spirits that quote 7 might be a way of describing how the sound moves across the landscape, carried by wind. Modern science and ancient story aren't opposed. They're complementary. Two approaches to understanding the world, both valuable, both carrying truth. The longest recorded singing event from a single dune lasted over 15 minutes. It was triggered by a combination of strong wind and an avalanche of sand, and the resulting hum was so loud and sustained that people reported hearing it from several miles away. 15 minutes of continuous song from the earth. What must that have been like? To stand there as the sand vibrated beneath you, the air full of sound, the world reduced to that single, sustained note. It must have felt like time stopped, like you'd stepped outside normal existence into something else, something older and slower. Most singing events are much shorter, seconds or perhaps a minute or two. But even these brief performances carry weight. They're reminders that the earth is active, alive in its own way, capable of surprise and beauty. You don't need 15 minutes of singing to be affected by the phenomenon. Sometimes a few seconds is enough. A brief hum that catches you off guard, makes you stop and listen, plants a seed of wonder that continues to grow long after the sound has faded. In Brazil, there are beaches where the sand sings, and local fishermen have incorporated this into their understanding of weather. They've noticed patterns. The sand sings more on certain days, and those days are often followed by particular weather conditions. Whether there's a real correlation or not, the belief demonstrates how closely people can attune themselves to their environments when they pay attention. This kind of local knowledge, built up through generations of observation, is increasingly recognized as valuable by scientists. Indigenous and traditional communities often hold information about ecosystems that formal science is only beginning to discover or rediscover. The singing sand has been teaching people for as long as people have encountered it, not through words, but through experience, through the patience required to wait for it, through the surprise of hearing it, through the memory that lingers after. When you encounter something truly beautiful or mysterious, it changes you slightly. You're not the same person you were before. The singing sand marks everyone who hears it, leaving a trace that can't be measured but is nonetheless real. The mechanism of singing sand, the stick-slip motion of grains, is the same mechanism that produces other natural sounds. Squeaky hinges work on the same principle. So do violin strings. Even earthquakes, in a way, are a massive version of stick-slip motion, with tectonic plates grinding past each other until the pressure releases suddenly. Nature uses the same tools over and over, applying basic principles at different scales to create different effects. The singing sand and the violin, the squeaky hinge and the earthquake, they're all related, all expressions of the same fundamental physics. This unity is part of what makes the world comprehensible. The laws that govern sand grains govern planets. The forces at work in a dune are the same forces at work in a star. Everything is connected. Everything participates in the same grand pattern. You're part of that pattern too. The atoms in your body were forged in stars. The calcium in your bones, the iron in your blood. These elements were created in stellar explosions and scattered across space, eventually coalescing into planets, rocks, sand, and living beings. The same forces that move sand grains move molecules in your cells. The same principles that create songs in the desert create thoughts in your mind. You're not separate from the singing sand. You're made of the same stuff, governed by the same laws, participating in the same magnificent, unfolding story. There's profound comfort in that recognition. You belong here. You're not an outsider looking at nature. You're nature looking at itself, the universe experiencing itself through your consciousness. The singing sand is your distant cousin, a relative in the family of matter and energy that makes up everything. When you listen to it, you're hearing a voice that, in some deep sense, is also your own. In Algeria, in the Sahara's Grand Erg Occidental, there are dunes that local people call _8_. These dunes are known for producing particularly loud and clear songs, and they're visited by travelers seeking unique experiences. Guides lead small groups into the desert, timing the journey to arrive at the dunes during the hottest part of the day, when singing is most likely. They encourage visitors to remove their shoes, to feel the hot sand directly, to connect with the landscape through their skin. Then everyone climbs to the crest of the dune, and together they slide down, creating a cascade of sand that triggers a deep, resonant boom. The sound vibrates through everyone's bodies, linking them not just to the earth, but to each other, all feeling the same vibration, all participating in the same moment. If you're enjoying this peaceful journey, perhaps you could help others find it by leaving a like on this video. And if you have a moment, a comment sharing what this story means to you would be wonderful to read. The playlist has many more of these calming explorations waiting for you. The mathematical models that describe how singing sand works are elegant in their complexity. They account for grain size distribution, friction coefficients, avalanche dynamics, acoustic resonance, and a dozen other variables. Yet, for all their sophistication, these models can only approximate what actually happens when a dune sings. There's always something that eludes complete description, some element of chaos or unpredictability that prevents perfect simulation. This isn't a failure of science. It's a recognition that nature is more intricate than our descriptions of it, that reality always exceeds our ability to fully capture it. This gap between model and reality is where wonder lives. We can understand the general principles without being able to predict every detail, and that partial understanding, that mixture of knowledge and mystery, is often more satisfying than complete certainty would be. The singing sand invites us to be comfortable with incomplete understanding, to appreciate without needing to fully explain, to experience without reducing the experience to equations. In Afghanistan, before decades of conflict transformed the region, there were reports of singing dunes in the central deserts. Whether these dunes still sing, whether they've been affected by human activity, or remain pristine, is uncertain. The desert doesn't observe political boundaries, doesn't care about human conflicts. It continues its slow work of moving sand, creating and destroying dunes according to patterns older than nations. This indifference isn't cruel, it's simply the nature of geological processes. The Earth operates on timescales where human history is barely a flicker. Wars come and go, empires rise and fall, and the singing sand continues, unchanged, patient, eternal. There's something humbling about that perspective, but also liberating. Our individual troubles, as real and important as they feel, are temporary. The earth will continue, the sun will rise, the sand will sing. Not because of us or for us, but simply because that's what it does. This doesn't diminish human experience. It contextualizes it. We're part of something vast and ongoing, contributors to patterns we didn't create and won't complete. Our brief time here is a chance to participate, to witness, to add our small vibration to the greater song. In India, in the Thar Desert, there are dunes where the sand sometimes produces a sound that locals compare to temple bells. The pitch is higher than typical singing dunes, possibly due to finer grain size or different mineral content. And the timbre has a metallic quality that does indeed evoke bells or chimes. The Thar Desert sits on the edge of the Indian subcontinent, a transition zone between dry and humid climates. It's not as consistently arid as some deserts, receiving occasional monsoon rains that temporarily silence the singing sands, but also support more life than deeper deserts can sustain. Here, you might see camels walking past singing dunes, their footsteps triggering small chirps and hums. You might encounter desert foxes at dawn, hunting among sand that sparkles with frost despite the heat that will come in just a few hours. Life and sand exist together, each adapting to the presence of the other. The singing sand doesn't prevent life. It's simply one more condition that life learns to navigate. Just as plants grow in soil and fish swim in water, desert creatures make their homes in and around singing sand, accepting its occasional music as part of the landscape. There are people who collect recordings of singing sand, building libraries of sounds from different deserts around the world. These collections serve multiple purposes. They're scientific data, artistic material, historical records, and tools for meditation or relaxation. Listening to a recording of singing sand is different from experiencing it in person, of course. You can't feel the vibration through your body, can't see the landscape, can't sense the vastness of the space around you. But the sound itself still carries power, still evokes something primal and calming. These recordings allow people who will never visit a desert to nonetheless encounter singing sand. They democratize the experience, making it available regardless of physical ability, financial resources, or geographical location. In that way, they're a gift, a way of sharing wonder across boundaries. Some meditation practitioners use recordings of singing sand as focus objects, letting the sustained, droning sounds anchor their attention. The lack of melody or rhythm makes the sound ideal for this purpose. It doesn't carry you away into thought or emotion. It simply is a constant presence that allows the mind to settle. The physics of how humans perceive low-frequency sounds is particularly interesting. Sounds below about 20 hertz, called infrasound, are often felt rather than heard. Many singing tunes produce some energy in this range, creating vibrations that register in the body before the brain identifies them as sound. This may be part of why singing sand feels so profound. It's not just auditory, it's tactile, visceral, a full-body experience that engages you at multiple levels simultaneously. You're not just listening to the earth, you're feeling it, resonating with it, becoming temporarily synchronized with its vibrations. Some researchers have speculated that infrasound might affect human emotion or consciousness in subtle ways. While the evidence is still preliminary, it's possible that the low frequencies and singing sand contribute to the calm, meditative states that people often report experiencing when they encounter it. Whether the effect is physical, psychological, or some combination, the result is the same. People feel changed by the experience, moved by something they can't quite articulate. In Mexico, in the Sonoran Desert, there are dunes that sing occasionally, though they're not as well known as singing dunes in other regions. The Sonoran is a diverse desert, home to the iconic saguaro cactus and a surprising variety of life. Here, the sand must share space with plants and animals, more abundant than in harsher deserts. When the Sonoran dunes do sing, the sound mingles with other desert music, the calls of cactus wrens, the rustle of wind through palo verde trees, the distant howl of coyotes. It becomes part of a larger symphony, one voice among many. This reminds us that singing sand doesn't exist in isolation. It's embedded in ecosystems, part of landscapes where many things are happening simultaneously. The dune that sings at noon might be home to beetles at midnight, might shelter seeds waiting for rain, might be slowly migrating across land where ancient peoples once walked. Everything is layered, everything is interconnected. The singing is just one aspect, one expression of a much larger, more complex reality. The aesthetic appreciation of singing sand has inspired artists across many disciplines. Painters try to capture the colors of the dunes. Poets write about the sound. Musicians incorporate recordings of singing sand into compositions. Filmmakers travel to remote deserts to document the phenomenon. Art and nature inform each other. Nature provides the inspiration, the raw material, the sense of wonder that drives creative expression. And art, in turn, helps people see nature differently, notice things they might otherwise miss, develop deeper appreciation for the world around them. When someone reads a poem about singing sand or sees a painting of desert dunes, they might be moved to seek out the experience themselves. Or they might simply pause for a moment and appreciate that such things exist, that the world is more beautiful and mysterious than their daily routine might suggest. In this way, singing sand ripples outward, affecting people who never touch it directly, contributing to a larger culture of wonder and appreciation for the natural world. Before we continue, if this story is bringing you peace, perhaps you could share that peace with others by liking this video and leaving a comment. These small acts help build a community of people seeking calm and explore the playlist. There are many more gentle stories waiting there. The conservation of singing dunes is a relatively new concern. For most of history, these places were remote enough that human impact was minimal. But as tourism increases, as off-road vehicles venture into previously pristine areas, some singing dunes are being damaged or silenced. The problem is subtle. Vehicles compress the sand, changing its structure. Human development nearby can alter wind patterns. Even increased foot traffic can affect the surface layer where singing occurs. The dunes don't disappear. They remain physically present, but they lose their voice. Some countries have begun protecting notable singing dunes, designating them as natural monuments or restricting access to sensitive areas. These measures aim to preserve the phenomenon for future generations, ensuring that others will have the chance to experience what we can experience now. There's a philosophical question here. Do we have a responsibility to preserve singing sand? It's not alive in the biological sense. It's not endangered the way a species can be endangered. Yet, something would be lost if all the singing dunes fell silent. A particular kind of beauty, a unique expression of natural processes. Most people who have heard singing sand would say yes, we should protect it. Not for economic reasons or practical benefits, but simply because it's precious, because it adds richness to the world, because beauty matters. The idea that beauty itself is worth protecting, independent of utility, reflects a maturing relationship with nature. We're moving beyond purely instrumental thinking, valuing nature only for what it provides us, toward recognizing that nature has value in itself, that preservation can be justified by aesthetics and wonder alone. The indigenous Tuareg people of the Sahara have navigated singing dunes for centuries, using them as landmarks and reference points. They've developed names for specific dunes, stories about their formations, knowledge about when and why they sing. This knowledge is practical but also cultural, woven into identity and tradition. The singing dunes are part of what makes the Sahara home for the Tuareg, familiar presences in an otherwise vast and sometimes disorienting landscape. As climate change affects deserts worldwide, altering precipitation patterns and wind currents, some scientists worry that singing dunes might be affected. A shift in rainfall could make sand damper. Changes in wind could alter how dunes form and move. The phenomenon might migrate, appearing in new locations while disappearing from old ones. Nature is always changing, of course. The deserts we know today are not the same as they were 10,000 years ago, and they won't be the same 10,000 years from now. Change is constant. The only real permanence is transformation. Still, there's value in bearing witness to what exists now, in appreciating the present configuration of the world, even knowing it's temporary. The singing sand we can hear today is a gift, one that might not be available to our distant descendants in quite the same form. That impermanence makes the experience more precious, not less. Everything is fleeting. Every moment is unique, unrepeatable, gone as soon as it arrives. The singing sand reminds us to be present, to fully inhabit our experiences while they're happening, because they won't last forever. In Pakistan, in the Kholistan Desert, there are rumors of singing dunes that have gone silent, their voices lost to changes in the landscape, or possibly never verified in the first place. It's hard to distinguish between folklore and fact when dealing with remote places and phenomena that appear only occasionally. This uncertainty is part of the story. Not everything is documented, verified, recorded. There are still mysteries in the world, still places where reality blurs into legend, where you can't be entirely sure what's true. That ambiguity can be uncomfortable for minds trained to seek certainty, but it can also be refreshing. Not knowing leaves room for possibility, for imagination, for the sense that the world might still hold surprises. Some of the most powerful experiences of singing sand are accidental, stumbling onto a singing dune without knowing what it is, hearing that unexpected hum and feeling the world shift slightly, realizing you're in the presence of something extraordinary without having sought it out. These unplanned encounters often carry more impact than deliberate visits. There's no anticipation to manage, no expectations to meet. The experience arrives pure and unfiltered, catching you off guard in the best possible way. In our hyper-planned, overscheduled world, such accidents are increasingly rare. We research everything, read reviews, plan itineraries. We know what we're going to see before we see it, but occasionally, if we're lucky, we're surprised. And singing sand is one of those surprises that can still happen if you wander far enough from the beaten path. The sound of singing sand has been compared to many things: thunder, cellos, whale songs, airplane engines, Buddhist chants, foghorns, didgeridoos. Each comparison captures something true while missing something else, because the sound is ultimately unique, not quite like anything else in human experience. This difficulty in description is common with profound experiences. The most meaningful moments in life often resist language, existing in a space beyond words. We try anyway, reaching for metaphors and comparisons, knowing they're inadequate, but hoping they'll communicate something, give others a glimpse of what we felt. The singing sand invites this kind of poetic language, not because it's complicated, but because it's moving. It touches something deep, activating responses that are more emotional and intuitive than intellectual. You don't need to be a poet to be moved by singing sand. You don't need special training or preparation. You just need to be there, to listen, to let the experience affect you without analyzing or explaining it away. In Saudi Arabia, in the Rub al-Khali, there are singing dunes so remote that few people ever hear them. They sing for the foxes and the oryx, for the occasional Bedouin passing through, for the wind and stars and emptiness. Does a dune singing in perfect isolation, heard by no human ear, have less value than one that thousands experience? Philosophy says no, the value is intrinsic, not dependent on witnesses. But psychology says something more complex. There's a particular joy in witnessing, in being the one who hears, in carrying the memory of something rare and beautiful. Both can be true. The dune song has value whether anyone hears it or not, and our hearing it, our being changed by it, adds a different kind of value, not to the dune, but to us, to our lives, to our understanding of what's possible. Every person who hears singing sand becomes a carrier of that experience. They might tell others about it, inspiring them to seek it out. They might simply hold it in memory, drawing on it during difficult times, remembering that the earth can sing, that beauty exists in unexpected places. In this way, a single encounter with singing sand can ripple outward through time and relationships, affecting people who never visit a desert, planting seeds of wonder that might bloom years later in unexpected ways. If you're finding calm in this journey through the singing sands, a like would help others discover this peace too. And if you have a memory of natural wonder, sharing it in the comments creates connection. The playlist holds many more of these gentle stories, each one a refuge from noise. The silence between songs is as important as the songs themselves. A dune that sang constantly would eventually become background noise, something you'd tune out rather than attend to. But because singing is rare, occasional, unpredictable, each occurrence carries weight. This principle applies broadly. In music, the rests between notes are what give structure and meaning to sound. In conversation, the pauses allow words to land, to be absorbed. In life, the quiet times between intense experiences are what make those experiences memorable. The singing sand understands this inherently. It doesn't strain to perform. It waits in silence until conditions align, then sings fully, completely, without holding back. When the moment passes, it returns to silence without regret, without grasping for more. There's a kind of wisdom in that rhythm, a lesson about when to give and when to rest, when to speak and when to listen, when to act and when to simply be. In Egypt, near the oases of the western desert, there are dunes that the ancient Egyptians might have encountered. While we have no written records of them experiencing singing sand specifically, they certainly knew these deserts intimately, crossing them on trade routes and pilgrimages. It's pleasant to imagine an ancient trader 3,000 years ago climbing a dune at sunset and hearing it hum, feeling the same wonder and surprise that we would feel today. The sand hasn't changed. The physics haven't changed. Only the humans have changed, carrying different languages and beliefs, but experiencing the same phenomenon. This continuity across time is profound. The singing sand connects us not just to place, but to all the humans who have ever encountered it across centuries and cultures. We're part of a lineage of witnesses, a chain of experience that stretches back to the first humans who walked in deserts. And we're passing that chain forward, hopefully, ensuring that future humans will have the same opportunity, will stand where we've stood and hear what we've heard, adding their own wonder to the accumulated wonder of generations. The technical term for the sound produced by singing sand is __9_. This dry scientific phrase captures the mechanics but misses the poetry. Yes, it's an acoustic emission, but it's also a voice, a song, a conversation between earth and air. Language shapes perception. If we only ever call it, quote, 10, we might miss the full richness of the experience. But if we only ever call it, quote, 11, we might miss the concrete, understandable processes that make it happen. Both languages have value, the poetic and the scientific. And ideally, we can move between them, enriching our understanding by seeing the phenomenon from multiple angles. The singing sand doesn't care what we call it. It simply is, existing independent of human language, human understanding, human presence. Our names and descriptions are for us, not for the sand, tools we use to think and communicate about something that ultimately exceeds all descriptions. In Chile, in the Atacama, there are night tours where people go to the singing dunes after dark. The sand is still warm from the day's sun, and sometimes it can be coaxed into song even in darkness. The experience of hearing singing sand you can't see, under a sky brilliant with stars, is reportedly transcendent. Without visual distraction, sound becomes even more powerful. You can't see the dune, so you focus entirely on the vibration, on the feel of sand beneath your feet, on the sound that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It's immersive, enveloping, a total sensory experience that some people describe as almost spiritual. The Atacama's night sky is among the clearest on Earth, so far from light pollution that the Milky Way casts shadows. Under such a sky, with the Earth humming beneath you, the sense of being part of something vast and ancient intensifies. You're a small point of consciousness in an immense universe, yet fully present, fully alive, connected to everything. These are the moments that change people, that shift perspectives, that plant questions that continue to unfold for years. Not dramatic revelations necessarily, but subtle recalibrations of priorities and values, gentle reminders of what matters. The study of singing sand has attracted researchers from multiple disciplines. Physicists analyze the acoustics. Geologists study the dune formations. Mechanical engineers model the grain interactions. Even psychologists have studied how people respond emotionally to the experience. This multidisciplinary interest reflects how rich the phenomenon is, how many different angles it can be approached from. No single perspective captures everything. Each discipline contributes a piece, and together they build a more complete picture, while still leaving room for mystery. Science at its best is like this: collaborative, humble, curious, always aware that there's more to learn. The singing sand has been studied for decades, yet researchers continue to find new questions, new angles, new aspects they hadn't previously considered. This ongoing investigation isn't just about understanding singing sand for its own sake. The principles being studied, how granular materials behave, how vibrations propagate through loose media, how surfaces interact at microscopic scales, have applications in fields as diverse as civil engineering, planetary science, and materials manufacturing. Basic research into natural phenomena often yields unexpected benefits. You study singing sand out of curiosity, and along the way, you discover principles that help design better shock absorbers, or understand avalanche dynamics, or predict how sand will behave on other planets. In Iran, in the Dashti Kavir Desert, there are legends of singing sands that were interpreted as the voices of angels or jinn, depending on the religious tradition of the storyteller. These legends served multiple purposes. They were entertainment, moral instruction, and also a way of encoding practical information about the desert landscape. A story about a singing dune that marked a good camping spot or a dangerous shifting sand area would be remembered and passed down more reliably than abstract instructions. The supernatural elements made the stories memorable, ensured they were retold, and thus preserved practical knowledge within a cultural framework. We might smile at the idea of angels making sand sing, but the underlying wisdom that stories are powerful tools for preserving and transmitting information remains valid. Modern science tells different stories, using different frameworks, but it's still fundamentally about understanding the world and communicating that understanding to others. The sand itself is indifferent to whether we explain it through physics or poetry, science or story. It continues doing what it's always done, offering its song to whoever is present, whatever framework they might use to make sense of it. Before we go further, if this exploration is giving you peace, please consider liking this video and leaving a comment, even just a word or two about how you're feeling. It helps this channel grow and brings these stories to more people seeking calm. The playlist has many more of these gentle journeys. The experience of sliding down a singing dune is unforgettable. You start at the top, the crest where the wind has piled sand into a sharp ridge. Below you, the slope drops away, smooth and steep, an invitation to let go. You take a step, then another, and the sand begins to shift. What started as solid ground becomes fluid, cascading, carrying you down with it. You lean back, half walking, half sliding, and suddenly the sand begins to sing. The vibration starts in your feet and rises through your body. It's not a metaphor. You literally feel it in your bones, your chest, your jaw. The sound surrounds you, seems to come from inside you as much as from outside. You're not observing the phenomenon. You're part of it, a participant in the song. This participatory quality is what makes the experience so powerful. You're not a tourist looking at something behind glass. You're in it, of it, contributing to it through your weight and motion. The boundary between self and world becomes permeable, uncertain, beautiful. At the bottom of the slope, you stop, catch your breath, turn around to look at the trail you've left. A streak of disturbed sand zigzagging down the dune's face. Already, the wind is beginning to erase it, smoothing the surface, preparing the dune for its next song. Everything is temporary. Your footprints, the specific configuration of sand grains, the sound that just filled the air, all gone, or going, absorbed back into the larger patterns of wind and time. But the experience itself, the memory of sliding down a singing dune that stays with you, becomes part of who you are. In Australia, in the Simpson Desert, indigenous Arrernte people have known about singing sands for thousands of years. Their stories incorporate the phenomenon into a larger cosmology, linking it to ancestral beings and creation stories that explain how the landscape came to be. These stories aren't just colorful myths. They're sophisticated knowledge systems that encode observations about the environment, relationships between different elements of the landscape, and ethical guidelines for how to interact with the land respectfully. When indigenous elders talk about the land having voice, having consciousness, they're not speaking naively. They're articulating a worldview where mind and matter, subject and object, aren't absolutely divided, where the world is seen as fundamentally alive and relational. Modern physics, interestingly, has come to similar conclusions through different routes. Quantum mechanics suggests that observation affects reality, that there's no pure separation between observer and observed. The universe isn't made of isolated objects. It's made of relationships, interactions, processes. The singing sand sits at the intersection of these worldviews. Indigenous knowledge says the land has voice. Science says particles in motion create vibrations. Both are true. Both are useful. Both enrich our understanding. The future of singing sand is uncertain. Climate change, human development, and shifting weather patterns all pose potential threats. Some dunes might fall silent. Others might begin singing in new locations as deserts expand or contract. Change is inevitable. The question is whether the change will happen so rapidly that these ecosystems can't adapt, or whether it will occur slowly enough that new equilibria can establish themselves. The answer depends partly on human choices about carbon emissions, land use, and conservation priorities. It's sobering to think that children being born today might not have the chance to hear singing sand, that it might become something relegated to recordings and memories like the songs of extinct birds. But it's also motivating, a reminder that the choices we make now have consequences, that preservation requires active effort. Even if all singing dunes fell silent tomorrow, the phenomenon would remain possible. Singing sand isn't a species that can go extinct. It's a configuration, a set of conditions. If those conditions are recreated, whether naturally or artificially, the sand will sing again. This offers a strange kind of hope. The knowledge isn't lost. The physics is understood. If humanity survives long enough and decides it matters, singing dunes could be restored or even created in new locations. But how much better to preserve what already exists, to protect the dunes that are singing now, rather than trying to recreate them later. In New Zealand, there are beaches with sand that whistles softly when disturbed. The locals call it, quote, 12, and it's a beloved local phenomenon, attracting visitors who come specifically to hear it. Children play games, running back and forth to create as much sound as possible. This lighter, more playful relationship with singing sand is just as valid as the profound, meditative encounters in vast deserts. Beauty takes many forms, speaks in many voices. The deep boom of a desert dune and the cheerful squeak of a beach are both expressions of the same underlying physics, both worthy of appreciation and wonder. Sometimes we need the profound and overwhelming. Sometimes we need the simple and joyful. The singing sand offers both, adapting to different landscapes and creating different experiences, meeting people wherever they are. The mathematics of sand movement is closely related to the mathematics of avalanches, earthquakes, and even economic markets. All involve systems that remain stable until a critical threshold is reached, then suddenly reorganize themselves, releasing accumulated energy. This behavior, called self-organized criticality, is one of the fundamental patterns in nature. It appears everywhere, from neural firing in the brain to the distribution of solar flares. The singing sand is a relatively simple, accessible example of this deep principle. Understanding how sand avalanches work doesn't just satisfy curiosity about a beautiful phenomenon. It provides insights into how complex systems behave more generally. The lessons learned from singing sand might inform how we understand and predict other kinds of critical events. This is why basic research matters, why studying something that seems purely aesthetic or recreational can have broader value. You never know what connections will emerge, what principles will turn out to be universal, what seemingly obscure discovery will enable future breakthroughs. The singing sand doesn't care about these applications, of course. It sings whether we learn from it or not, whether we understand it or not. But we're enriched by understanding, by seeing connections, by recognizing patterns that repeat across scales and contexts. If you're finding wisdom and rest in this exploration, please share it with others through a like and comment. These small acts build community and help this channel continue creating peaceful spaces. The playlist offers many more gentle stories for whenever you need calm. There's a meditation practice that involves visualizing yourself as a grain of sand. You imagine being small, simple, part of a vast collective, moving with forces larger than yourself. It's a practice in humility, in letting go of ego, in recognizing your place in larger patterns. The singing sand makes this meditation concrete. You stand on a dune, surrounded by billions of grains, each one essentially identical, each one indistinguishable from all the others. You're like one of those grains, unique in your particular position and history, but made of common materials, subject to common forces, participating in patterns you didn't create and can't control. This recognition could be depressing if framed wrongly, a sense of meaninglessness, of being insignificant. But it can also be liberating. You don't have to hold the universe together. You don't have to be special or unique or extraordinary. You can simply be like a grain of sand, doing your small part in larger patterns, finding meaning in participation rather than in standing out. When the sand sings, it's not any individual grain that makes the sound. It's the collective, the coordination, the synchronized movement of millions. Each grain contributes, but none is responsible for the whole. The song emerges from relationship, from interaction, from the space between things, rather than from anything itself. Our culture often emphasizes individual achievement, but the singing sand reminds us of the power of collective action, of what becomes possible when many small contributors work in harmony. Not through central control, there's no grain directing the others, but through each one responding to its immediate conditions, and those local responses summing to something beautiful and coherent. In Mauritania, in Western Africa, there are dunes in the Sahara where nomadic herders bring their livestock to graze on sparse desert plants. These herders know the dunes intimately, including which ones sing and under what conditions. For them, the singing sand isn't exotic or mysterious. It's just part of the landscape, familiar as the sound of wind or the calls of birds. This everyday relationship with wonder is something modern cultures often lack. We compartmentalize. Beauty goes in museums. Nature stays in national parks. Transcendence is reserved for special occasions. But for people living close to the land, wonder is woven into daily life, present in ordinary moments. The singing sand can't be packaged or controlled. You can't see it on a screen and truly understand it. You have to go to the desert or the beach or wherever the singing sand exists. You have to feel the heat, smell the dry air, experience the scale and silence in space. Only then does the full impact land. In this way, it resists commodification. It can't be fully translated into digital media or brought to you. You have to go to it, meet it on its terms, in its environment. This quality is increasingly rare and increasingly precious. The effort required to reach singing sand, the travel, the planning, the physical exertion of climbing dunes, becomes part of the value. You appreciate it more because you worked for it, because you had to commit time and energy to the experience. Ease of access, while democratizing in some ways, can diminish appreciation in others. But even those who can't physically visit singing dunes can encounter them through recordings, descriptions, photographs, and stories like this one. These mediated experiences aren't the same as being there, but they have their own value. They plant seeds, create longing, expand imagination, and remind us that the world is larger and stranger than our immediate surroundings suggest. In the United States, the Bureau of Land Management protects several significant singing dunes, recognizing them as natural resources worth preserving. This recognition represents a shift in values, acknowledging that something can be important and worth protecting even if it has no economic utility, even if it's just beautiful or fascinating. The protection isn't absolute. People can still visit, still climb the dunes, still trigger the singing. But activities that might damage the dunes, driving vehicles across them, removing sand, altering the landscape, are restricted. It's a balance between access and preservation, between allowing people to experience the phenomenon and ensuring it survives for future experiences. These kinds of policy decisions reflect underlying philosophical questions. What do we value? How do we balance present use against future availability? Who decides what's worth protecting and what isn't? The singing sand forces us to think about these questions in concrete ways. The granular materials research inspired by singing sand has practical applications in industries like agriculture, where understanding how grain flows through machinery matters, or in pharmaceuticals, where precise mixing of powders is critical. Even the oil and gas industry uses principles learned from studying sand dynamics. It's a reminder that pure research and applied research feed each other. You study something out of curiosity, with no particular application in mind, and years later, someone realizes the principles apply to an important, practical problem. Or you're trying to solve an applied problem and realize you need to understand fundamental principles better, so you go back to basic research. The singing sand has contributed to both directions of this flow, inspiring basic questions that led to deeper understanding of granular physics and providing a natural laboratory for testing theories that have broader applications. All of this happens behind the scenes, invisible to most people. When you stand on a singing dune, you're not thinking about pharmaceutical manufacturing or oil extraction. You're just listening, feeling, being present. But your ability to have that experience, the fact that the dunes still exist, that they're protected, that you can access them, rests on countless decisions and accumulated knowledge, on values and priorities and choices made by people you'll never meet. We're all connected in this way, part of vast networks of relationship and consequence. The singing sand makes this visible, tangible. The sound you hear is produced by grains that traveled far, shaped by forces operating over immense time scales, reaching your ears through a chain of cause and effect that extends far beyond what you can perceive directly. If this journey is bringing you peace, a like would help others discover this calm too. And sharing your thoughts in the comments, even just a word, creates connection. The playlist holds many more gentle stories for whenever you need refuge. The question of why singing sand moves us emotionally is worth exploring. It's not just the novelty or the rarity. There's something about the experience that resonates at a deeper level, touching something ancient in our psychology. Perhaps it's the unexpectedness, the surprise of sound coming from something we think of as silent. Sand is supposed to be quiet, inert, just backdrop. When it suddenly speaks, it violates our assumptions in a delightful way, reminding us that we don't know the world as completely as we think we do. Or perhaps it's the scale, the realization that this sound is being produced by millions of tiny particles acting in concert. It's a demonstration of emergence, of how complexity arises from simplicity, something our brains seem predisposed to find fascinating. Or perhaps it's the sensory nature of the experience, the way the sound is felt as much as heard, the full body engagement that makes it impossible to remain detached or analytical. You're pulled into the moment, into your body, into direct experience, in a way that's increasingly rare in our screen-mediated lives. Probably it's all of these things and more, a convergence of factors that adds up to something profound. The singing sand speaks to multiple levels of our being simultaneously, aesthetic, intellectual, emotional, even spiritual for some people. In China, in the Gobi Desert near the border with Mongolia, there are dunes that local people call the, quote, 14. These dunes are part of the cultural landscape mentioned in poetry and literature, visited on outings and pilgrimages. The singing is seen as auspicious, a sign of the land's vitality and power. This cultural significance adds another layer to the phenomenon. It's not just a physical event, it's a symbol, a carrier of meaning that varies across cultures and contexts. The same physical process can be interpreted as spirits, as physics, as divine voice, as natural art, and all of these interpretations can coexist, none canceling the others out. The richness of meaning we bring to natural phenomena is part of what makes us human. We don't just observe, we interpret, symbolize, create stories, find connections to our own lives and experiences. The singing sand becomes a mirror, reflecting back our hopes, fears, values, and questions. When children hear singing sand for the first time, their reactions are often pure delight, laughter, wonder, excitement. They run up and down the dunes trying to make the sand sing louder, competing to see who can create the best sound. There's no heavy interpretation, no need to analyze or explain. It's just fun, pure sensory joy. As we age, we often lose this capacity for unmediated delight. We become self-conscious, analytical, burdened by knowledge that distances us from direct experience. But the singing sand can break through these barriers, can trigger a response that bypasses our adult defenses and connects us to that childlike sense of wonder. This might be one of its greatest gifts, not teaching us something new, but helping us remember something we knew once and forgot. That the world is amazing, that surprise and delight are possible. That beauty doesn't need to be earned or understood. It just needs to be noticed. The physics of singing sand continues to reveal subtleties. Recent research has found that the initial vibration doesn't start uniformly across the sliding sand. Instead, it begins in small patches that then synchronize and spread, creating a wave of coordinated motion. It's a cascade effect, where local disturbances trigger neighboring areas until the whole avalanche is vibrating together. This process happens in milliseconds, too fast for human perception. But it's crucial to understanding how the sound is generated and sustained. It's another example of self-organization, the system organizing itself without any central control, purely through local interactions. The implications of this research extend beyond sand. Understanding how synchronization emerges in granular materials might help us understand similar processes in neural networks, in flocking behavior, in any system where local interactions lead to global coordination. But again, the sand doesn't know or care about these implications. It synchronizes because the physics of friction and motion makes it inevitable under certain conditions. The meaning, the significance, the application, these are human additions, ways we extend the phenomenon beyond itself. In some spiritual traditions, there's a practice of listening to natural sounds as a form of meditation. Waves, wind, rain, birdsong. The idea is to let the sound fill your awareness without labeling or analyzing it, to become fully present with the auditory experience. The singing sand is ideal for this practice. The sound is interesting enough to capture attention, but not so complex that the mind starts storytelling or analyzing. It's sustained enough to settle into, but not so constant that it becomes background. It's a natural focal point for awareness. If you were to sit beside a singing dune, eyes closed, just listening, you might notice how the mind quiets, how thoughts slow, how you become more present in your body. The vibration in your chest becomes a physical anchor, a reminder that you exist, that you're here, that this moment is real. This kind of presence is increasingly difficult to maintain in modern life. We're pulled in so many directions, bombarded by information and demands, rarely fully where we are. The singing sand offers a respite from that fragmentation, a chance to be completely here, completely now. In Antarctica, there are no singing dunes. The sand that exists there is frozen, locked in ice, silent. But researchers have wondered whether, during brief summer moments, when conditions might be right, some small patches of sand might produce sound. It's unlikely, but the question itself is interesting. Are there limits to where singing sand can occur? Are there environments too extreme even for this hardy phenomenon? The answer seems to be yes. Extreme cold, extreme moisture, extreme anything prevents the precise conditions required. Singing sand exists in a Goldilocks zone, not too hot, not too cold, not too wet, not too dry. It's a reminder that beauty often requires balance, that the most remarkable phenomena occur in middle spaces where multiple factors align. This is true in life as well. Too much comfort breeds complacency. Too much challenge breeds exhaustion. The sweet spot is somewhere in between. Enough stability to feel safe. Enough challenge to stay engaged. Enough routine to build patterns. Enough novelty to prevent boredom. The singing sand exists in its own sweet spot. And perhaps part of why we find it beautiful is recognizing, consciously or not, how rare and precious such perfect conditions are. Before we continue to the final sections of this journey, if you're feeling peaceful and grateful for this story, a like would help others find this same calm. And your comment, sharing how this makes you feel, builds community. The playlist has many more of these gentle explorations waiting for you. As we approach the end of this journey through singing sand, it's worth reflecting on what we've encountered. Not just facts about a physical phenomenon, but a way of relating to the world. A reminder about presence and patience, beauty and transience. The singing sand asks nothing of us except that we notice it. It doesn't need our attention to exist, but our attention enriches our existence. In choosing to be curious about it, to learn about it, to imagine experiencing it, we open ourselves to wonder, and that opening changes us. There are people who have built entire careers around studying singing sand, geophysicists who have spent decades investigating the details, publishing papers, attending conferences, constantly refining their understanding. For them, the phenomenon is endlessly fascinating, a puzzle that reveals new layers the more closely it's examined. And there are people who have heard singing sand once, perhaps accidentally, and that single experience has stayed with them their entire lives. A touchstone they return to in memory when they need to remember that the world is larger and more mysterious than daily life suggests. Both relationships with singing sand are valid and valuable. You don't need to become an expert to be moved by something. A brief encounter can carry as much meaning as a lifetime of study, sometimes more, because it remains unanalyzed, preserved in memory as pure experience rather than dissected understanding. In Morocco, there's a saying among desert guides, quote, 15. It's a simple observation, but it contains wisdom. The phenomenon is always potential, always present, but it only becomes experience when someone is there to hear it, to feel it, to receive it. This is true of all beauty, all wonder. It exists independent of observers, but something magical happens in the meeting between phenomenon and consciousness, between world and awareness. Both are necessary. Neither is sufficient alone. We complete the world by witnessing it, and the world completes us by providing experiences that transcend our individual concerns, that connect us to something larger, older, more fundamental than our personal stories. The singing sand will continue long after every person currently alive has died. It will sing for future generations, for people not yet born, in languages not yet invented. This continuity is both humbling and comforting. We're part of a story that preceded us and will continue after us. Our moment in that story is brief but real. We get to be here now, to encounter singing sand in this particular configuration of the universe, this particular arrangement of grains and wind and time. That's not a small thing. That's everything. Some mystics and philosophers talk about the universe becoming conscious of itself through conscious beings, that when you look at a star, the universe is looking at itself. When you listen to singing sand, the universe is hearing itself. This might be poetic language, or it might be literally true. Either way, it points to something profound about the relationship between mind and matter, observer and observed. You're not separate from the singing sand. You're made of rearranged star stuff, just like the sand is. The same atoms that vibrate in the dune vibrate in your body. The same forces that move sand grains move electrical signals through your neurons. Consciousness isn't separate from the physical world. It's how the physical world experiences itself. When the sand sings, when you hear it, something remarkable happens. Matter recognizes matter. Vibration acknowledges vibration. The universe touches itself and knows that it exists. This isn't mystical nonsense. It's a straightforward description of physical reality, translated into experiential language. And yet, it sounds mystical because the fact of consciousness, the fact of experience, the fact that anything feels like anything, remains deeply mysterious even to science. The singing sand doesn't solve that mystery, but it embodies it beautifully. It's matter behaving in ways that seem almost intentional, creating something that sounds almost musical, triggering responses that feel almost spiritual, blurring boundaries between physical and experiential in ways that remind us how artificial those boundaries might be. In Sweden, researchers have created artificial singing sand in laboratory conditions, carefully manufacturing quartz grains to exact specifications, sorting them precisely, creating miniature dunes in controlled environments. Sometimes it works. The artificial sand produces sound. Sometimes it doesn't, despite apparently meeting all the requirements. This failure to perfectly replicate nature, even when we understand the principles, is revealing. It suggests there are still factors we don't fully understand, or that the natural process has redundancies and tolerances that artificial ones lack. Or perhaps it's simply that nature has the advantage of time and scale. Natural singing dunes have been refined by millions of years of wind and weather, by countless cycles of moisture and drying, by processes that operate at scales we can't easily reproduce. The laboratory failures aren't really failures, they're learning opportunities, chances to discover what we're missing, to deepen our understanding. And they're reminders to remain humble, to recognize that our knowledge, while impressive, is always incomplete. The singing sand will keep some secrets, will continue to surprise us, will resist being completely captured by our models and equations. And that's as it should be. The world should exceed our understanding. Mystery should remain, not as something to be defeated, but as something to be appreciated. As this story comes toward its close, imagine yourself one more time on a singing dune at twilight. The heat of the day is fading. The sky is turning colors, amber blending into violet. The first stars appearing in the deepening blue. The sand beneath you still holds warmth. And as you shift your weight, as you prepare to descend, it begins to hum. The sound surrounds you, fills you, connects you to the earth and sky and everything in between. For this moment, there's nowhere else to be, nothing else that matters. You're completely here, completely present, completely alive. And then the moment passes, the sound fades, silence returns. You descend to the base of the dune, leaving footprints that the wind will erase, carrying a memory that nothing will erase. If this story has given you peace, a like would help others find that same peace. And if you'd like to share what this journey has meant to you, the comments are waiting. The playlist holds many more gentle stories, each one a doorway to calm. Let's bring this journey to its resting place. We've traveled far together through the world of singing sand, across deserts and beaches, through science and story, from the largest dunes to the smallest grains. We've heard about the physics and the poetry, the ancient encounters and modern research, the questions answered and mysteries remaining. But now, it's time to rest, to let all these words and ideas settle like sand itself, finding their natural places, creating their own patterns in your mind and memory. The singing sand will continue without us. Tomorrow, somewhere in a desert, a dune will hum. Maybe someone will be there to hear it, maybe not. Either way, the song will rise and fade. The grains will vibrate, and still, the earth will speak its quiet language to the wind and sky. You don't need to do anything with what you've learned here. You don't need to become an expert or plan a trip or even remember all the details. Just let the sense of it remain. The image of sunlit dunes, the idea of earth making music, the feeling that the world is more remarkable than routine might suggest. If you ever feel overwhelmed, if life becomes too loud or complicated, remember the singing sand. Remember how it waits in silence most of the time, how it doesn't force or strain, how it offers its song freely when conditions align and returns to quiet without regret. Remember how each grain matters while no single grain is responsible for everything. Remember how beauty emerges from simple materials following simple rules, how complexity doesn't require complication, how wonder doesn't require strangeness, just attention, just openness, just willingness to be surprised. Close your eyes now if you like. Take a slow breath deep into your belly, then let it go completely. Feel yourself settling like sand settling after the wind passes, each part of you finding its natural rest. Imagine warmth beneath you, not uncomfortable heat, but gentle warmth like sun-baked sand that's begun to cool. Imagine vastness around you, space that asks nothing, accepts everything, simply holds you in its patient embrace. You're safe here. You're held here. The earth beneath you has been here for billions of years and will be here billions more. You can rest against that certainty, that continuity, that patience. If thoughts arise, let them. If your mind wanders, let it. Like grains of sand shifting in wind, thoughts move through consciousness, form patterns, dissolve, form again. You don't need to control them. Just notice them. Let them be. Let them pass. The singing sand doesn't try to sing. It simply exists in its conditions. And when the moment is right, song happens naturally, effortlessly, as a consequence of being what it is. You don't need to try either. You're already complete, already enough, already exactly what you need to be. Even if that feels untrue, even if you're tired or confused or carrying difficulties that seem too heavy, the earth holds all of it, all the sand, all the weight, all the complexity. And the earth holds you too, supports you, accepts you, asks only that you exist, that you rest, that you allow yourself to be exactly as you are in this moment. Let your breathing slow even more. Let your muscles release one by one, letting go of tension you might not have known you were holding. Your jaw can soften, your shoulders can drop, your belly can be soft and loose. There's nothing you need to do right now, nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to fix or solve or figure out. This moment is just for rest, just for being, just for letting yourself be held by the quiet dark, by the patient earth, by the slow, steady rhythm of your own breath. If you're still awake, that's fine. If you've drifted toward sleep, that's fine too. There's no wrong way to rest, no failure in wakefulness, no achievement in unconsciousness, just being here, just allowing this time, just receiving these words and images is enough. The singing sand has taught us what it can. Now it's time to simply be with what remains, the quiet, the stillness, the soft dark, the gentle space between thoughts. Let everything slow, let everything soften, let everything settle into its natural place. You're held, you're safe. You can rest now. Thank you for traveling with me through the singing sands. May your rest be deep and your dreams be peaceful. The world will be here when you wake, full of wonders like singing sand, waiting patiently for your attention whenever you're ready to offer it again. For now, just rest, just breathe, just be. Good night.